Welcome to the Biblical Perspectives for Leadership podcast, where timeless biblical truths meet modern leadership. We are thrilled to have you join us on this journey of exploring how biblical principles can guide us in leading with wisdom, integrity, and purpose. Whether you're leading in the church, your workplace, or your community, this podcast is designed to inspire, challenge, and equip you for the road ahead. Let's dive into today's conversation and discover how Scripture shapes the way we lead.
Welcome back to Biblical Perspectives for Leadership. So what if the unbearable pressure you're feeling at work right now isn't actually a sign that you're failing?
Right, like it's not a failure at all.
Exactly. What if it's the exact mechanism designed to force you into your next success? I mean, today, we are just completely tearing up the idea that leaders should avoid pressure.
Yeah, we really are.
Yeah.
Because, instead of treating organizational or even personal pressure as this structural failure that you have to escape as quickly as humanly possible, we're going to examine it as a catalyst.
A catalyst, I love that. And to do that, what's our source material for today's deep dive?
Well, we're looking at the story in the book of Exodus, specifically Exodus chapter 12, and we're examining a very specific environment here.
Right, because the Israelites have been oppressed slaves in Egypt for generations at this point.
Exactly. It is a brutal, deeply entrenched, and frankly, seemingly hopeless system.
Yeah.
But, and this is the key, that environment is about to drastically change.
Yeah.
And the mechanics of how that change occurs, it provides this masterclass in navigating highly volatile transitions.
It really does. So for you listening right now, whether you are running a company, maybe managing a complex organizational restructure, or navigating a really difficult career pivot, I want you to think about an area in your leadership where the pressure feels entirely unsustainable.
Yeah. Get a really specific situation in mind.
Right. Keep that specific situation in your head. Because our goal with this deep dive is to dissect the story in today's material to show you exactly how leaders extract value, resources, and, well, momentum from those exact moments of maximum friction.
And we pick up the story right at the breaking point. This is in Exodus chapter 12, verse 33. The material highlights this immediate, just massive shift in the environment.
Oh yeah, the shift is wild.
It is. The Egyptians went from actively delaying Israel's departure to being, and I quote, urgent upon the people to send them out of the land in haste.
In haste, like get out right now.
Exactly. The very power structure that built its wealth by oppressing this group is suddenly mobilizing to push them out the door. So the fundamental leadership insight here is that the pressure reversed polarity.
Reversed polarity.
Yeah, I mean, the exact same force that held them back actually became the force expelling them forward. Discomfort isn't always a disaster. Sometimes it's a sign that a season is ending.
Okay, wait, I need to challenge this right out of the gate, though.
Go for it.
Because in modern leadership, we are constantly taught to be proactive, right?
Right, of course.
We're told to anticipate market shifts, Right. to act before we're forced to. Like, if a leader is just sitting around waiting for the pressure to become unbearable, essentially waiting to be expelled, isn't that just passive, ineffective leadership?
Right.
I mean, is pressure essentially God's eviction notice from our comfort zones? Like, we just don't move until it hurts too much to stay.
That's a great way to phrase it, actually. But you don't aim for passivity. You recognize reality. Not every exit is entirely within a leader's control.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're locked in a contract or bound by board decisions or, tied to a macroeconomic cycle you just can't outmaneuver.
Right.
The insight isn't wait until you're miserable. The insight is recognizing that when the environment suddenly turns ruthlessly inhospitable, it's not necessarily a reflection of your incompetence.
It's not your fault, in other words.
Exactly. It is a structural rejection. Yet the system can no longer contain you. I mean, the Egyptians didn't just become mildly annoyed, right? The text notes, they feared they were all dead men.
Wow.
The pressure peaked because the old system was collapsing under the weight of the new reality.
That makes sense. Okay, so you aren't advocating for deliberate stagnation.
No.
They're advocating for correctly diagnosing the friction. Like, you're being pushed because the structure can no longer hold what you were becoming.
Exactly.
But, and here's the catch, the immediate consequence of being violently pushed out like that is a total lack of preparation.
Oh, absolutely. It's chaotic.
Right. Look at Exodus chapter 12, verse 34. The story gives us this highly specific, really gritty detail.
Yeah, the dough.
Yes. The people took their dough before it was leavened, with their kneading troughs bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. I mean, they are fleeing with raw Unrisen dough.
Which brings us to the harsh reality of execution under duress. Deliverance rarely comes with ideal operating conditions.
Understatement of the year right there.
Right. I mean, the bread hasn't risen because there was zero time to let it sit. The demand for immediate obedience superseded the desire for a finished product.
Yeah.
In leadership, and really in everyday life, you do not always have the luxury of perfectly curated conditions. You have to move with what you have, not what you wish you had.
Okay, so unfinished does not mean unusable.
Precisely. Unfinished does not mean unusable.
You know, in the tech world, we call this shipping a minimum viable product, an MVP.
Yes, exactly.
You launch the software with a few bugs because hitting the market timing is just way more critical than flawless code. So this raw dough is essentially the ultimate MVP.
It really is.
But from a purely practical standpoint, fleeing into a desert with raw dough feels incredibly chaotic and risky. If they are leaving so incompletely, how do they survive the transition?
Well, that actually leads us to this really surprising way the material addresses provision. It directly subverts our expectations of what it looks like to be expelled from a system.
Yeah, let's look at Exodus chapter 12, verses 35 and 36.
Okay.
The Israelites did as instructed, and they actually borrowed silver, gold, and raiment, successfully spoiling the Egyptians.
Which is just fascinating. The lesson for everyday life here is that pressure might push you out, but God does not send you out empty-handed.
Right.
This wasn't random wealth either. It was long overdue compensation for years of labor. The takeaway is to not assume a hard transition equals a loss. The end of one chapter inherently contains the resources for the next.
Okay, wait. Pushback time again.
Bring it.
If you are rushing for your life with unbaked bread, stopping to gather gold seems incredibly counterintuitive.
It does.
Doesn't this mean leaders must maintain intense focus under pressure so they don't miss the provision right in front of them? Like stopping an evacuation to negotiate sounds crazy.
It sounds crazy, yes, but the power dynamic wasn't against them anymore. It had inverted.
What do you mean?
The Egyptians were desperate for them to leave. That desperation was the leverage. Think about it in modern organizational dynamics. When a toxic management team wants a dissenting leader gone, their primary goal is a fast, clean break.
To mitigate liability and disruption.
Exactly. They want you out in haste.
Yeah.
A smart leader understands that the company's urgency to resolve the friction is exactly what funds the severance package or the retained equity.
Ah, I see. You
Right.
leverage their urgency.
Exactly. But doing so requires immense emotional control. When the adrenaline of a sudden exit hits, human nature is to develop tunnel vision. We just want the pain to stop.
Right. We sprint for the door empty-handed.
But the strategic leader maintains enough presence of mind during the crisis to follow the instruction, to ask for the resources. The end of one role fundamentally contains the capital required to fund the next.
That reframes the entire concept of a forced exit.
Right.
You're not just losing an old context, you're actively liquidating it to capitalize your new venture. And the moment that capitalization happens, we see this massive identity upgrade.
We really do.
Oh.
Look at the result in Exodus chapter 12, verse 37.
Mm-hmm.
They are moving from Ramesses to Sukkoth with about 600,000 men.
600,000. That's not a small fleeing band of victims anymore.
No, not at all. This is the precise moment their operational identity changed. They stopped being a disorganized, reactionary labor force and began operating as a defined entity.
Wow.
Leaving old places requires letting go of old labels like failure or overlooked.
So an executive who is constantly micromanaged and labeled as difficult gets pushed out. The moment they step into their own venture with those extracted resources, that label just evaporates.
Exactly. They're the chief executive now.
And obviously, a group of 600,000 newly empowered people marching out is literally impossible to ignore, which leads directly into how a leader's breakthrough impacts the people around them.
Yes.
Because in Exodus chapter 12, verse 38, we get this really fascinating detail from the material. A mixed multitude went up with them.
Right, the mixed multitude. This is so crucial.
Who were they?
Well, they were non-Israelites, opportunists, basically foreigners, who saw the collapsing system of Egypt and were drawn to the visible deliverance of Israel.
Yeah, they see the momentum.
Exactly. When God moves in your life, others notice.
Mm.
And for you listening, remember that your private struggle and subsequent breakthrough might be the exact evidence someone else is watching to find their own faith.
That is powerful. It's like being that brave first person to leave a toxic corporate culture to start a new healthy venture.
Oh, yes.
And suddenly, all the other top performers from your old department resign and want to follow you. Your personal obedience creates this spiritual pull.
It really does. But
But
there is. Managing a massive group of followers during a sudden exit is terrifying. The danger here is divided loyalty when the environment gets difficult.
because they haven't been prepared for the discipline of the new vision.
Precisely. A mixed multitude follows the excitement of the exit. If you hire that entire team of top performers from your old toxic company, you have to realize they're bringing the trauma and the bad habits of that toxic culture into your new startup.
Oh, wow. They don't know how to operate in freedom.
Right.
They only know how to operate under a micromanager.
Exactly. They are physically out of the old system, but the old system is not out of them. A leader has to manage this influx incredibly carefully.
And the sheer speed of this event makes managing that multitude nearly impossible. You don't have time to build a 90-day onboarding plan.
No, not at all.
Which brings us to the velocity of it all. Let's look at Exodus chapter 12, verse 39. They baked unleavened cakes because they were thrust out and couldn't tarry.
Right, they couldn't prep. Speed is the ultimate stress test for leadership infrastructure. We often strategize for change at a comfortable pace,
Guilty. We build elaborate roadmaps.
Right. But rapid, discontinuous change forces you to rely on instinct and immediate obedience. People often pray for change, but then they panic when it arrives quickly.
Yeah.
But this story proves that what feels like a rushed, chaotic exit was actually prophetic fulfillment. In leadership, sudden shifts aren't always confusion.
No,
they're often confirmation.
Confirmation. Wow.
Yeah.
That totally changes how you view a crisis. You cannot manage a forced extraction the same way you manage a quarterly review.
Absolutely not. Success isn't meticulous documentation anymore. Success is simply forward motion.
But there's also the psychological toll of the environment they're leaving. Which brings us to the final verse from the material today, Exodus chapter 12, verse 40.
Yes.
The Israelites had been in Egypt for 430 years. 430 years.
Which brings up a really profound realization. Pressure has an expiration date.
An expiration date.
Yeah. 430 years is a massive amount of time. Generations. But it had a boundary. Long seasons are not permanent seasons.
I have to ask, though, how does a leader keep from building their core identity around a painful season, especially when that pressure has lasted for years, like corporate PTSD?
It's hard. But you have to remember that no pressure outruns God's promise. The timeline definitively ended.
Right.
As a leader, you have to draw a hard boundary between the old regime and the new reality. You cannot assume that because people are in a new environment, they will automatically adopt a new mindset.
You have to explicitly define the end of the old system.
Exactly. You have to prove to them that the chronic pressure actually had a limit.
Okay, let's pull the mechanics of this entire operation together. The material gives us an incredible framework for understanding how pressure practically moves a leader from stagnation to a completely new operational level. 3 points here. First, pressure pushed them.
Right. Egypt got too tight. The system couldn't hold them anymore.
Second, pressure prepared them. It forced quick movement and trust, meaning they had to carry that raw, unrisen dough.
Yes, prioritizing core utility and action over aesthetic perfection.
And third, pressure positioned them. They capitalized on the urgency of their oppressors to extract resources, leaving with provision and a brand new future.
They leveraged the exit to fund the enterprise.
So for you listening right now, take a hard look at your current stressful environment. Stop trying to make permanent what is clearly becoming temporary. That unbearable pressure might not be a symptom of your failure. It could be the exact mechanical force required to eject you from a system you have completely outgrown. Stop trying to negotiate a permanent truce with an environment that is actively trying to push you out the door.
That's exactly right. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today.
Let's hear it.
If your current unbearable pressure is actually just the force required to launch you forward so that the mixed multitude can finally see your leadership, what is the one piece of unleavened dough, that imperfect, unfinished project or decision that you need to just pick up and move with today?
What a question. Imperfect, unfinished, but you just need to move with it. Escaping the old system doesn't mean the work is over. It means the real work is just beginning. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep challenging the structures around you, keep extracting value from the pressure, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Biblical Perspectives for Leadership podcast. I hope today's insights have encouraged and equipped you to lead with faith, wisdom, and purpose. Remember, the greatest leader of all time taught us that true leadership is about serving others. If you enjoyed this episode and podcast, be sure to subscribe, share it with others, and leave a review. It helps us reach more people with these transformative truths. Until next time, keep leading with grace and walking in purpose.